Look, life is not about perfection. It's about getting 1% better. What's up, my friend? Jackie Ferrari coming back at you with another Motivational Monday video. This is episode 3. If you stuck around for the past 2 weeks, checked out my last 2 videos, really appreciate you sticking around. Subscribe to the channel before we get started, and let's get into it. So today's video is for you if you have been someone who has been in a slump for the past few days, few weeks, few months, and you're wondering, how do I get out of this? You know, I've been stuck. I just feel like I have no purpose in life. I'm just kind of stuck, going through the rut. I feel you. The past week and a half for me has kind of been that way. I've been stuck in a slump. It's been kind of down for a number of reasons. And I'm just going to share with you kind of the mindset and kind of the mindset shifts I have to remind myself of every single time I get in a slump or just feel down, and really just practical things that you can think about and keep in mind as you're trying to get out of the slump. So the first thing to keep in mind is please give yourself grace, because, you know, when you're in a slump, it can take time to get out of a slump. It's not going to be like, all of a sudden one day, you know, you're just fine. Like it can take weeks sometimes to get out of a slump. I would give yourself at least a week. So don't beat yourself up because like tomorrow you're not in perfect condition. Like, you know, I know there's all these gurus on social media who tell you gotta, you know, try to achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months. You gotta hustle, you gotta grind, and it makes you feel like you gotta be perfect. And it makes you feel like when you're struggling, you're failing. Well, struggling isn't failing, my friend. It's part of the process. So just give yourself grace, you know, and don't try to achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months. This is one of the worst things you can do. I'm taking that from Tom Bilyeu. He said, I'm not even going to quote what he said, but he said something about trying to achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months. And I just think that's complete BS because 1, you're not God. 2, you can't control things. 3, it's a 10-year plan for a reason, you know, and then you wonder why you try to achieve it in 6 months, you fail because it's a 10-year plan. So just give yourself time. And I think this idea of like feeling like you have to be perfect is one of the worst things that you can do for yourself. And it's just, man, I just hate when people think like that, because I think it really can make the slump worse. Like it can keep you in the slump. This mindset of, oh, I'm not perfect, I'm failing, that can often keep you in the slump. So just want to remind you, if you're in a slump, focus on how you can get 1% better every day. That's the easiest thing you can do. If you've read Atomic Habits, which, by the way, I have not read the book, by the way, but I know the concept of this whole idea of getting 1% better. So if you've read the book, just get 1% better. How can you get 1% better today? You know, that's all I want you to focus on in getting out of the slump. Focus on getting 1% better. You know that saying, slow and steady wins the race? Well, it really is true, because, you know, if you take things slow, you're going to get farther ahead. You see, in Prince EA made an incredible video. I'm actually going to drop the video in the link below, but there was this concept called Kaizen that he talked about in the video, and it's a Japanese concept, this idea that small and incremental changes can actually lead to big and incredible results, more than just massive changes could on their own. You know, it's continuous improvements. So 1% better. Eventually, you know, you'll get to where you're trying to go. Can reap significant improvements. You know, another idea I want you to think of is have this pilot mentality. You see, pilots, when they're flying planes, they don't just fly in a straight line. You know, it's nearly impossible because of all the elements, and there's things that, you know, you can't fly in a straight line. It's next to impossible. And what pilots do is they course correct. They may go a mile or two off course, and then they, you know, turn back to get back on route. And I want to encourage you to have that same mentality, my friend. Don't think you got to go, you know, a lot of us, when we go 50 miles off course, we think we can just go right back. Well, no. If you go 50 miles off course, try going back 1 mile on course. Take it 1 mile at a time. Don't try to go 50 miles at one time. You know, they're constantly correcting. So I want you to have that same mentality. Hopefully that made sense, but why do you have that same mentality? You know, and if you're trying to build discipline, you know, it takes time. You got to give yourself grace. If you're trying to be back to being disciplined like you used to, you got to give yourself grace. You know, start with the simple things, because again, the foundation is important, and it starts with the simple things. Don't try to go from 0 to 100. Go from 0 to 1. Don't even try to go from 0 to 2. Just go from 0 to 1. If you can't even get from 0 to 1, you're not going to get from 0 to 2. That's what I have to remind myself of. Don't try to speed up the process. There's things that you learn in the process. I know it takes time. It may be frustrating. You may feel like you're a failure because you're doing the same stuff over and over again, but, you know, slow and steady wins the race is true for a reason. Go from 0 to 1. Don't try to go from 0 to 100 this week. So my friend, I want to ask you, how can you go from 0 to 1 today? What's one thing you can do? Whether it's like, oh, you didn't do your run yesterday. You were supposed to work out. Okay, that's okay. Stop worrying about yesterday. Stop worrying about the past. What can you do today to make sure you get your workout in? And even maybe, can you go 5 minutes longer? Maybe you have a 45-minute workout plan, but what can you do today to make sure that, okay, I'll just do 15 minutes today. That can be your challenge for the day. You know, how can you make yourself 1% better? Whether it's, oh, I didn't eat any fruit yesterday. Fruits and vegetables are important. So today I'm going to eat 1 piece of fruit. That's my goal. Then you eat 1 piece of fruit. And then tomorrow it's like, okay, I'm going to eat 2 pieces of fruit. And then you just keep getting 1% better. So don't go crazy. Don't go crazy. And a big thing, last example I'll give is if you're trying to wake up early, I know a lot of people have this goal. Don't try to go from waking up at 8 a.m. to waking up at 6 a.m. If you can, great. But a lot of people, that's very hard. So if you're trying to I'll give the example 5 a.m. even. If you're trying to go from waking up at 8 a.m. to waking up at 5 a.m., just start by waking up 15 minutes earlier. Don't try to wake up an hour earlier. Just every day, wake up 15 minutes earlier. So day 1, you wake up at 8 a.m. Day 2, you wake up at 7:45. Then you wake up at 7:30. Then you wake up at 7:15. So that your body eventually, you adjust. And then you also go to bed 15 minutes earlier. So you continue to adjust. Try that out, just 1% better. Just small incremental changes. It'll do you a lot more good than going from waking up at 8 to waking up at 5 the next day. And then you hate it and you feel like a failure because then the next day you don't get up on time. Because again, if you try to go from 0 to 100, this is the last thing I'll say on this. If you try to go from 0 to 100, you don't build the foundation, and you got to build the foundation. The foundation is so important, and it's like a lot of us in our society don't focus on building the foundation. You can only build the foundation if you go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3. You got to take it slow. You can't rush that process. So, all right. Hopefully those all made sense. And last point, this is my favorite point. Break up your routine. You see, a lot of times we go through slump because our life is boring. We just haven't made any efforts to make changes. You see, human beings, yes, routine is important. Don't get me wrong, but what are some ways that you can actually change up your routine every now and then, or keep your routine? Maybe for instance, when I go for runs, I don't always like to run at the same park. That just gets boring. Changing up the scenery. Okay, today I'm gonna run at Lilburn Park. Tomorrow I'm gonna run at Five Forks Park. There's lots of parks in Atlanta. It's not just one park. I try to, change up the parks that I go to. So it's not always boring. And so I don't feel like my life has no meaning. Sometimes when you're slumped, it's because you're just doing the same thing over and over again. You're not making changes. Sometimes you got to change things up. And doing that can give you a fresh perspective on life, But you're always doing the same thing in the same way over again. That gets old. And life, that just gets boring. That's a boring life to have. Consistency is important. But what are some little things you can do to still do your routine, but also just do it in a different way? I know a lot of gurus talk about routine, but for me, routine involves figuring out because again, that's what's best for me. This really helps me a lot. Now, again, if it doesn't work for you, don't try it. That's great. But I think for a lot of people, their life is so boring because they're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's that's a very boring way to live. I'm the kind of person that likes adventure. I like routine, but I also like having adventure. I like having fun. And for me, to do that, to make things more fun, means changing them up, doing things in a different way than what I'm used to. And so yeah, those are some ways you can make it easy for yourself. Just change up your routine. And then also, again, focus on getting 1% better. Take things slow because, again, slow and steady wins the race. Hope this video blessed you, my friend. Drop a comment below. Think about one thing you can do to go from 0 to 1 today or tomorrow instead of going from 0 to 100. Drop that in the comments below. I'd love to celebrate that with you and hopefully pray for you over that. And then second, share this video with a friend. Third, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.